First of all, 15 seconds to tell you why I'm the person to talk to you about this. I am a specialist in increasing circles of specialization Indo-European languages, Germanic languages, Old Norse, in terms of the history of the development of those languages. And Old Norse is right next to Old English, and that's medium circle of Germanic languages. Anyone familiar with Old Norse is familiar with Old English. I might not be in the 100th percentile of PhDs to talk to you about Old English, but I'm in the 99th percentile. Now let's talk about this new story, because it's being misreported a little bit. The two big misreportings that I'm hearing about a manuscript of the newly discovered Old English text are A, that this is somehow the earliest known text of our earliest known Old English poem. That's an exaggeration. It's not the earliest text, but it's an important, good text. And the second misrepresentation that I'm seeing is wild misrepresentations of what the Old English text is, and that results from people reporting it that don't know Old English, and they're misinterpreting some letters as being letters that they are not. Okay, so what this text is Caedmon's hymn, which the Venerable Bede, he's always called, says in his text, originally written in the early 700s in Latin, his ecclesiastical history of the English people, is a poem composed in Old English by an illiterate peasant named Caedmon to honor the Christian God early in the Christian history of the English people. So this poem would have been composed in the 600s originally, and our manuscripts of Bede's ecclesiastical history largely are much later than even Bede's life. So this new manuscript, it's not new obviously, this manuscript that has kind of newly come to scholarly attention is important because it is relatively close to Bede's life. It's from the early 800s, and when you can get within a century of a medieval author, that's a pretty good deal. So, you know, it just like in modern times, medieval hits often aren't recognized until after the author's life, and you know, today it might take 10 years, but back then it might take 100 years. Okay, so Caedmon's hymn is often regarded as the earliest poem in English, and I should clarify what Old English is, because it's not Stonehenge. Just because something is old and from what we today call England, that does not make it Old English. Old English is a special term for the language brought to Britain in the 400s AD from the North Sea coast of the European continent. So the North Sea coast of what we today border up into Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. And because of its provenance from that area of speaking Germanic languages, English is much more closely related, very obviously closely related to for example, Danish, German, and Dutch, but not to, for example, Welsh. So Old English and Old Norse are quite close, and if you want a video that shows a demonstration, 1.5 2-minute conversation between an Old Norse speaker and an Old English speaker, you can find that pretty easily on this channel. Okay, so Caedmon's hymn, being our putatively earliest poem in Old English, it might, you know, you can argue about this, but that's probably right. Earliest preserved poem. Obviously, there are other poems we don't have written down. We have lots of manuscripts of it, because there's lots of manuscripts of Bede's ecclesiastical history. What's interesting is that much of the time when someone has copied the Latin text of Bede's ecclesiastical history, the text of this Old English poem is written in the margins by somebody else. It's almost as if someone were reading a text that said, and then, how can I reach these kids? Taylor Swift composed Shake It Off, and then just moves on to the next subject. But somebody is reading this and says, no, that slappeth. I need to record the lyrics, and, you know, writes the lyrics to Shake It Off in the margin or something like that. One thing that's really interesting about the text, this newly publicized text from Rome, is that it actually has the text of the Old English poem right there in the main text of Bede. So that's kind of special. And the fact that it's so early is special. It means there's been less time for corruptions of the text to creep in. And there are 5 major variants of Caedmon's hymn, because there's so many different manuscripts, you can create a stemma. Actually, the scholarly article about this, which is linked in the pinned comment, has an excellent breakdown about this. And this particular manuscript text of Caedmon's hymn is a member of a variant recension of this text that previously only 3 manuscript texts had. So that's kind of cool. This gives us another window into that, and I actually suggest this may be an older variation of the poem than had previously been believed, because this text, produced in the early 800s, is clearly not produced in England, because there's a confusion in it between the Old English letter win, which is based on a rune, and the Roman letter P. So if you don't know Old English, you might actually think that letter is a P, and it looks like the scribe of this manuscript did. So it's not copied in England, but it has variations too that must have come from the English language developing over a century or so. So this looks like actually a really early copy from the continent somewhere, of a really early copy from England somewhere, of a really early either oral or written version of this poem. And it's in the native dialect of Caedmon, Northumbrian English. So it's very valuable, but it's not the earliest text of Caedmon's hymn. It is suggested by the authors of the article to be the 3rd earliest. It's still very cool. Old Norse guys can be jealous of Old English guys sometimes for having so many copies of some things. Okay, so what does the text say? Because there has been confusion in the manuscript between that win, that W letter, and a P, and because obviously someone writing for, a news outlet doesn't necessarily know Old English either, and doesn't know that those letters are not P's, they're W's, this text has been copied from the scholarly article into, for example, AP News, and really, really misrepresents what this would sound like. So I'm going to give you a slightly normalized, I'm going to convert wins to W's and make a couple other spelling changes that represent just sort of papering over a couple copying mistakes. And I'm going to read this to you in Old English, and then I'm going to give you an off-the-cuff translation. Keep in mind, I'm not a native speaker of Old English. Obviously, I'm a native speaker of Clint Eastwood's dialect of Old Norse, so you're going to hear a little bit of that accent here, but I don't think Old English people would take too much issue with how I pronounce it. Nu e shulun herja hevun riches ward, mettudas maxti ant his modja thank. Werk wuldur fadur swa he wundra jhwas, etchi drichten or astalde. He erist shop du bernum heaven to hrove hallig sheppen, tho middum jer mon kines werd, etchi drichten after tia de fyrum on foldu freya almechti. Now we shall honor the guard of the heavenly kingdom, the might of the fate determiner of God, and his mind considerations, his thought, the work of the Father of wonders, as he, or possibly the Lord of wonders, if that's that Thoth's father word just occurred to me, as he established the origin of each of wonders, that eternal Lord. First, he shaped for the children of earth, that's us, we get a shout out, heaven, holy heaven, as a roof, the maker. Then the guardian of mankind, he gave Midgard, Midumjord, this is the word that's going to become Middle Earth in Tolkien's interpretation and Legendarium, that eternal Lord, he granted it to men on earth, that almighty Lord. All right, well, that's kind of, like I said, off the cuff, but I don't think anybody would quibble too much with my presentation there. So this is cool. It's an important, interesting discovery, but too many news sources are reporting those W's as P's, and too many news sources are reporting this as something that it isn't, which is like a big, first discovery of a first poem in Old English or something like that, or the first attestation of it. It's not, but it's still really, really neat. Now, while I'm talking to you about Old English and Old Norse stuff, gotta mention, if you're wondering where would an Old Norse guy tell me to get my Viking swag, I would tell you to go to Grimfrost. Those guys are great. They carry my books. They carry lots of stuff with runic inscriptions that I did, so you can tell they're actually accurate runic transliterations. And they're really nice. They will eat U.S. tariffs and import taxes as of May 2026. I also got to mention where I'm filming this. They don't know that I'm filming here because I just sort of ran over here this morning when I saw it. This was in the news. This is the Rock Garden. If you need stone in northern Colorado or southern Wyoming, you should come here. Also, if you want to support this channel and my efforts to get good information about historical languages out there, it's patreon.com/Norse by Southwest, and I am a translator of Old Norse. Recently, my translation of the Poetic Edda has been published in a second revised and expanded translation, so check that out for the original medieval stories of the Norse gods and heroes. And for now, from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.